Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, and yes, this week we are starting on the Blondie figure from Sucker Punch, so we're just going to jump into it and get a good start. The first thing I had to consider is shelf space, because that is becoming very dear and very precious. So, like I did with the other characters, I need to notch out the base. I think Baby Doll is the only character that has a complete round base. Everybody's had a notch taken out so that they can fit tighter together on the shelf and don't take up as much linear space. Height isn't going to be an issue. She's not any taller than Rocket is at this point, and she does. While she does have a gun in her hand, it does not come up above her head. So we're good that way. But the first thing I did was try to piece them together. Now, one thing that I've already lost is I'm going to have to compromise on keeping the brick pattern similar. You know, the other ones I was able to line up the bricks and keep them all straight. This I'm not going to be able to, simply because of the way she is positioned on the base, the way her feet are pegged into the base. If I twist it around to make the bricks line up, then she bumps into the other character, and that's no bueno. So, having said that, this is as close as I can get, and you can see it's as close as I can get, and Rocket's pistol just barely misses her head, and this is Rocket is the one that has the weird twisty posture, so we kind of have to, I mean, that's obviously a set thing, I can't change that. But that's the maximum closeness I can get. So what I'm going to do is just shift it out about 3/8 to 3/4 to an inch, and then I can make this new line here, and that still gives me a good amount of air space in between them. Blondie's pose isn't wild. Her arms aren't out at her side, or her arms aren't out, they're at her size, so she's a fairly compact figure. So that's good, because she will be the end of the big display on this side. If they ever do Amber would go on the other side of Sweet Pea, on the other end of the lineup. So it's good to have a good compact. She's got her gun up in her hand. That's a good border. So to get them as close as possible, that's about it. So what I need to do is make the new line on the base, and then get that little wedge cut out and sanded before we can get to working on Blondie. And there's a big issue I need to bring up as soon as I can put this camera down. Okay, so after a few false starts, you can see I've got the line that I need to cut. This is the final. These were a couple of other attempts. This was back when I was trying to make the cobblestones line up, and I realized that wasn't going to work. So let's get this piece nibbled out and sanded, and then we'll be ready to talk about the rest of this kit. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of Meet Blondie here. I went ahead and printed out a sheet so that I didn't have to keep going back and forth to the monitor to show you what I'm talking about. But this is just holding together with a little bit of gravity. There's no glue or tape. It's just to show you the stance of the character. Again, they're heroically proportioned. A little bit more muscle, a little bit more thigh, a little bit more butt than the actual actresses. But there you go. That's like I say, it's idealized. The likeness is somewhere in the middle, not as good as Baby Doll, but not as far off as, say, Rocket was. This is, again, I'm showing you where I'm doing the cutout. This is the figure from Moon Julie. Now, like I said about it being compact, the arm is down at the side. This arm is fairly close in. There's no wild amount of weaponry sticking up the back, or she's not raising a sword above her head, or twirling in a wild pose. These things are making me nervous, so I'm going to go ahead and take them off before they fall and break, because this resin stuff is fragile. It will shatter. See, things like that will fall. One thing I did notice that had to be created, the character has no nothing at the neckline, and that would be a problem for the casting of it. Again, the part, this is not done like the other characters where the head and chest was one piece. This was, the head is its own piece. So I could see where he created a necklace to give you a break there, which is a smart design idea. So you don't have to worry about trying to blend the neck up into the chest up into the neck, and we don't have that Wonder Woman problem. That was smartly stepped around. And of course we've got this big top knot of hair, which is going to be fun to paint because of all the characters I've done so far. This is the first true brunette. Everybody else has been either platinum blonde or honey blonde, so that's going to be a fun difference. Again, it's all flesh tone and shades of black, either warm blacks, cool blacks, some browns, and some a little bit of greens, but mostly it's all the same color palette we pretty much had before. Now the skin tone is going to be darker because Vanessa Hudgens has darker skin than the other actresses I've done so far. So we're going to be we're going to be very careful about that so that we produce that correctly. But the one thing I did notice that was left off of this kit, which was kind of surprising because Moonju Lee has been very accurate so far, but the one thing he did leave off is the goodly amount of fringe that is on this kit. Now here you can see the fringe on the actual costume. This was on a mannequin in a display somewhere, but you notice it here. There was another, I think it was either Hot Toys or Sideshow or somebody did a figure, and the only reason I pulled up this image was to show where the fringe was. I generally don't like referring to other people's toys or licensed stuff. I like getting my own references from the movie, but in this case, they had done the hard work for me, and this will show how far, this is obviously not the same pose, but it's excellent at showing how big and how many and how much fringe I need to add to the kit that I've got. And you can see where they're, both of the forearms down from the elbow up to the top of the sleeve get some fringe. There's fringe on the front and back of the belt. And that's going to come in handy because it's going to cover up a lot of this, a lot of these awkward pieces. Like there's supposed to be some fringe that hangs down right here and fringe that hangs here. I'm going to actually be making that out. I'm going to see what Michaels has to offer, but if I can find some faux leather that I could cut into strips that looks right in that scale. I'd rather not try to sculpt it out of epoxy sculpt. I can, I'd rather not. What I'm thinking I would do is take some, I had originally thought of maybe taking some of these flat shoelaces and gathering them up. They're about the right size and shape and dimension, and then maybe putting some Mod Podge or something on them to stiffen them up. Once I gang them all together, I can sculpt like a group of them and have them hanging down, and then treat them as one applique that I can stick on there after I have painted them. But that's not completely wrong. That's not completely bad. If all else fails, I will go back to getting some more of these shoelaces because I don't think they're too far off. They may be a little fat. They maybe need to be a little thinner than that, so I can count up the number of fringes that I'm going to need and drape them down accordingly. But that's going to be the fun added feature to this kit. And then of course I've got a Nazi zombie head that I can put on the base to make it match. So let's get to work on that base. That's the first thing I'm going to do, get some primer on that. I don't prime the figures, these 3D printed figures, I found I don't really need to prime them. I can go straight into painting them, but I do need to go ahead and put a gray primer on that base. Now, among the other jobs we have to do before we can really get down to putting anything together and priming and painting and all the fun stuff is we need to knock down some of these pins because, you know, like most other 3D printing, and I certainly ran into this with the rest of the baby doll or the rest of the Sucker Punch figures, was that locating pins and then the slots for the locating pins, they don't shrink at the same rate. These things are cured, and when they cure, they shrink. They shrink up a little bit, and that means these pegs will shrink up a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the hole the peg goes into will shrink up accordingly. Now, a lot of these things are designed with like zero tolerance. They are meant to, when they design them, they fit really tight. But in the curing process, things warp, things twist. Not so much that you might notice on the outside from a figure standpoint, but when you get to the highly engineered pieces, you might find that the pins aren't exactly letting the parts go together real tight. Now, it's something like this that's got where it's got all these indicators where the top knot fits into the rest of the head. I don't really need that pin. I can knock most of that off, or I could bore out the hole a little bit bigger, and still it'll fit just fine. It seems to me the larger the joints, the better they fit. When you start shrinking down the smaller joints, that's where you start running into your problems. I've never had a problem with the main joint of a hip here because, like I said, this is nice and big, and the slot that it goes into is nice and big, and those fit fine. So I'm going to take the Dremel and just round over some of these pins. I don't really need the pin to be that long. I know where this fits. I know the orientation and all that. So we're going to knock some of those down, and then we'll get to priming some of these parts. Now, luckily, how he's got this designed means that I'm sorry, I got the ammo pack on the back there. That, like say, the whole boot here can be primed a color, and we won't have to worry about it running into the this what might look like skin here. This is not skin. This is a very tight fitting leotard. So that's not going to be flesh colored. The only flesh coloring we really have to worry about are the shoulders, the chest, the hands, and then the head. There's a spot here on the arm that looks like it might be a cutout. It's not. This has that leotard behind it as well. So we only have the hand to worry about here, and only have the hand to worry about here. The rest of this gets a color. Alrighty, a few short minutes with a real thin coping saw, a hand saw, and a hacksaw, real thin hacksaw, cutting close to the line but not right up to it, and then sanding it roughly with a Dremel. Gets me the cutout here, and I don't remember if you remember what I did last time. Here's the piece that I cut out. So I am going to use that, wrap some sandpaper around it, and that's going to give me my inside arc for the size of what I need to cut out here, because basically I've got another one of these butting into that cutout, and it's going to need to have that same arc on it. So all I need to do is use that piece that I've cut out as my sanding block. So let me wrap some sanding paper around it, and we can follow that line just like this, and that will hit the high spots, knock all them down, so that what is left will fit the new spot. Actually, no, this I gotta mark it. This is what the cut's on this side. This is the bad side. This is the good side. So we do that, and we just wear it down against it until we have sanded out the perfect arc there. Right, I'm just closing up the day here, and I thought I would check in. I started working on the the base here. It's fairly simple. It's washes and dry brushing, but got the few of the base colors in. We'll let this dry and then come back and work on it some more tomorrow. I have painted in the leggings. Those are drying in the other room. Got a base coat of black on the hair. That's going to get dry brushed over top of. Also worked on the pantyhose here, for lack of a better term, the tights. And this is a brown with a bit of titanium gold in it to give the not necessarily a metallic look, but just to give it some sort of different sheen that makes it look like iridescent pantyhose. Good morning, folks. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, and this table's a mess. I don't mind telling you. You got to get messy before you get clean. It's just part of the natural process. I'm still massing in the major colors. I've got today I went ahead and put in like the browns that I'm going to use for some of these straps and the belts and the leather holsters and the axe holder. I really liked doing those leather belts like on Baby Doll and I think it was Sweet Pea that had a leather belt. I like doing that texture. I like doing those colors. It would make sense that these gals would all kind of pull from the same pile of clothing. Plus, it gives me something that isn't black or a variation of black. So I'm making the most of that. So I'm just massing in the colors so that I can see how they kind of fit against each other. I know that you have two distinct choices when you're doing your sucker punch clothing. You can either go with this is the costume in regular daylight as it is on a mannequin in a museum display. And these are the highly stylized colors that when they did their promotional posters, they kind of tinted each of them a different color and gave it the distinctiveness that way, to filter upon filter upon filter. I'm also looking at this. I believe this was a Hot Toys, or it might have been a Sideshow painting, a figure that was the arms out with the tassels, and that's giving me some hints as to what to make what colors. It's giving me liberty to put in some more browns and some more leathers and not have everything be so stark and black. So that's why I'm taking my opportunity. Plus this iridescent pantyhose type of look. I had to go back in and paint the skin back in. If I had one beef against this sculpt, it would be that I wish Moondrew had made these hair falls as add-ons, like he did with Baby Doll, rather than sculpted in, because it's going to be very difficult to paint behind those, much less get a consistent skin tone when you've got that big hunk of hair in the way. It'd be easy to take an airbrush and just like do a nice consistent shadow line there. Well, it's going to get caught up in the hair and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be, going back in and painting the hair on top of that with a small brush, that's something you can do, but getting the consistent tone behind all of that, that's my beef. That's what I wish these had been done as add-ons like he did with the other characters. But see, we've got the hair and the top knot. This is going to be fun, adding a lot of color to it. Now, of course, the temptation is to make, very dark brown, or very, dark browns. I don't want to go with a gray highlight or a white highlight, and I don't want to go with the comic booky blue highlight. So that's going to be more browns. And then, of course, we start playing with the metallics. Well, there are some silver buckles. There are some brass, and I think the goggles have got more of a brass in them than anything else. And so this, of course, the stitching, if I'm going to try to do that stitching, that's going to be a dry brush technique. But you've got rivets and buckles and all that kind of stuff, which is going to add some interest. So that's where we're at today. There is a color called dark iron that has a greenish tint to it. Let's see if I can find it here. These are all my regular blacks. Here it is. Here's the dark iron. That's got a greenish tint to it. That's what I'm going to use for, there's like a an outer, let's see, these guys here, it would be the outer stripe. This stripe here is more of the color of the pantyhose. This is more of a greenish tint, and then you get black as it wraps around the back. So that's what I'm going to do on these bits here. Again, it's tough to get a constant tone behind objects when you've got stuff stuck in front of them. But such is the nature. So we'll get back into massing in these colors, and each time I go through it, I am refining things, although it is kind of tough to get in behind, like I said before, getting in behind to paint things. Something that it had it been resin cast traditionally would have been, these little areas would have been filled in, because you can't get undercuts in a printed, or I'm sorry, in a cast resin piece, where you can get them in a printed resin piece. So yeah, this is, I think that color is going to look, that's going to look nice. I have to decide what these raised bits, I think those need to be black. All of these raised lines here, those I can make a either a semi-gloss or a gloss black to differentiate them from some of the other blacks that we're going to be dealing with. Okay, this is why we experiment. I've taken a piece of fringe, cut it up. I even skived the back of it a bit with a razor blade to thin it out. I don't know if this is the best solution. I don't know if it's going to be the one that I end up using. It's kind of ragged. It's not very clean. So plan B is going to be strip styrene. What I don't like about this is how straight it is, how flat it is. If I can do a bunch of them up as a mass and then heat it somehow so that I can mold it and bend it to the way I want to use it, and then it might stand a chance. They're both in the running. This would end up, let's see, if the arm is like this, then this would get attached at the elbow and kind of hang down like that. And if I could do something to jaggy that up a bit so that it not only does it hang right, but it has a bit of life to it, then I probably will go that route. I really do want to use this just because of the nature of it. So I'll see what I can do to maybe thin this down just a little bit more. It all comes down to the thickness of the material, and I was hoping to find something thinner, but that was it. So even the shoelaces that I was going to use are a little bit thinner than this piece of leather. So we'll try it, maybe look at the shoelaces and see how they go. If I cut them in half, they may be the right width. Okay, this is why we experiment, like I said. Okay, I think this is going to be the way to go. Bear in mind, they do still need to be trained, but that's what it looks like with just strips of styrene. And now I'm going to take a heat gun after this has had a chance to dry or to cure. I'm going to take a heat gun after it and bend them up. But I think, then of course I'll paint them and all that. But I think that once it's on like that, that's going to give me the effect that I'm looking for. I just need to bend these up a little bit. Yeah, we're closing up for today because I've done quite a bit, and it's one of those days where I did the brain work, and now that I know that something is going to work, I could just go into production mode tomorrow And what I'm very happy with is how these turned out. And I just put the heat gun to that, and that frayed them up a little bit more. But that looks a whole lot more realistic. And these ones here, since they all kind of hang down on top of each other, look a lot more realistic with that little curve melted into them. But that's gonna go something like that on the arm, so that's gonna fit. Well, it would help if I turned it around. That's gonna look just fine. There you go. Now you can actually see what I'm talking about. That's gonna work just fine. I'm gonna fray the edges of these guys up a little bit, and I'm just gonna take some small scissors here and just cut the very edge of these fringes to fray them up a little bit. And that's going to give it some randomness and some life, even though these ones overlap each other a whole lot more than the other ones do. But I think once you get a unifying coat of paint on there, you're going to see what they look like, and it's going to make a lot more sense. I've cut some of the long strips that are going to go underneath the belt and come down over the hips and down to almost the knee level, and they're going to end about there, and they're going to go around the front to about here. So there's going to be about maybe 8 of those. Some of them are going to hang down this way, some are going to hang down that way. And then, of course, the ones on this hip will actually go in. They'll go in this way and attach under the belt, and then come out over top of the ammo packs there. I'll maybe have a couple of them on that side of the ammo packs, maybe one in between and one on the other side. So yeah, those will all work. The troublesome thing is once I start gluing them to the inside of the top here, then this piece is going to be very cumbersome to work with all the fringe glued into it. So I may have to hold off on them, get them painted, put them aside, and then attach them later in the assembly. Good morning, welcome back everybody. It's what is it? Is it Wednesday? Yeah, it's Wednesday already, and things were getting a bit confused and complicated here. So I have moved everything off of the table that I don't need right away to be working on. I mean, I got a lot of good work done yesterday with those tassels, with the fringe on top, and I'm happy with how that's going, but it took a lot of build time off of the table. So I'm going to start from the ground up, and particularly because if I go to doing those long hanging tassels here, then I need to make sure, I need to make sure everything from here down is done so that I can put those tassels over top of it. So what we're going to start with today, or not start with, I've been doing some cleaning and some reshuffling of things, but I want to start with getting the leather done on the ammo holster, and maybe getting the pants parts done. I got a little bit of shading and sanding here on the pantyhose, but mostly I'm happy with how that's turning out. Well, good morning everybody. It's Thursday. It's the gateway to the weekend, and we are going to start finishing some parts of this. I never even thought that this could be done in all in 1 week. I'm taking my time, and with as much stuff that's going on around here right now, best to take the time. We've got a big old storm coming through Florida today. It's supposed to impact us tomorrow. As with whenever that happens around here, I expect to lose power at any minute. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. But if for some reason the video doesn't go up on time, that will be the reason. Back to Blondie's base here. One last thing to do to finish it up, really, and that is to add some of the little, there's not really lichens, but it's a little bit of artificial turf that I have a tendency to want. Well, I need to, because I want this to match the other bases. And basically what I'm going to do is just put some canopy glue in some of these cracks, and then sprinkle some of this over it, and then liven up the base a little bit. I'm going to go look at, I'm not going to bring them in because they're big, but I'm going to go take a hard look at some of the other bases and see how much of it I use. Don't want it to be overdone. I want it to be consistent. And that will finish up the base. And then all I need to do on the legs, now I did a bunch of work on these yesterday, probably off camera, but I've got the knee armor scuffed up. About the last thing I need to do is to I like these straps glossy. It gives that a good contrast to everything else. But I do need to paint up like the zipper and the buckles and these studs on here. So that's the last bit that needs to be done on these legs. If I can get the legs and the hips done today, I think that'll be good. I'm really happy with how the leather looks on the leggings here, particularly in this area where the gun holster goes. Again, I also need to paint up the buckles and the accents, but I want to give this one more pass with the brown / titanium and gold mix, just kind of clean up those seams, and then figure out what I'm going to do with the piping on the main part of her costume, because that is consistent top and bottom, and whatever I decide to do here, I need to carry it up. I think I want to go with an absolute black, not any of these off blacks, but the quality of the black. I think it needs to be flat black, and that's gonna finish her up to the waist level, and then that would be a good amount to get done. If I can get that done, then we'll see what else we can get done this week. But let's stop talking about it and start getting back to it. So let me go take a good long hard squint at the other bases, and then we'll come back and start putting some of the green stuff on here. Okay, I went and looked at the what the rest of the bases have, and it's actually surprisingly little. I thought I had done more than that, but that wasn't the case. So what I've done is I've just taken some the old basic canopy glue, a clear glue. It's easy. You could use a white glue really in Elmer's, but the canopy glue will dry up and disappear basically. And then I just over sprinkled some of the Hobby Flock Blend. It's a summer flock blend is what is the actual color, and it's overdone here. And what dries is going to dry and stick, and then what doesn't stick will get blown off. So we'll let this sit and then come back to it much later and dust off the loose bits. And for right now, we can just put this to the side. Okay, taking a look at some of the references I have, I find much confusion. There's references, and there are two different references that conflict with each other as to what color and what style of boots Blondie actually wears. Now, I've seen everything from leather boots to these black hide boots. But the one thing I've noticed, and I don't know for sure whether it's a color filter or what, but brown, it seems to be a lot more brown than black, or a lot browner than a normal black, which would be cooler. I mean, it's not a gray black, it's a brown black. So I'm just taking a very dry brush here of brown acrylic paint, and I'm talking about acrylic painters out of the tube. No fancy Tamiya's or anything here, just basic Liquitex acrylic paint. And I'm just dry brushing it over top of the black that I painted yesterday, or the NATO black, I think these were. And I'm just putting a brown cast on all of the parts of the boot that have this skin to it. Again, I've seen ones that have like a finished leather skin. I've seen ones that look more like a rough suede. I've seen boots that stop halfway up. Every combination, boots that zipper in the front, boots that zipper in the back. So I'm not exactly sure which ones Moonju has chosen for his reference for these, or whether he's just making them up out of whole cloth. And I know these are idealized versions. So like I said, I am using this as a wonderful excuse not to do yet another black on black on black paint job. So There will be black accents, obviously. I'm still leaving these studded straps to be black, but I'm also going to be shifting the color from a silver for these studs more to not a brass, but maybe a brushed nickel or a gold, not a bright gold, but something on the warm metallic side. Maybe not a copper. I know I have to start saying what it is and what it's not, but something that is maybe a dirty brass or a bronze for a lot of the clasps and the buckles. Something that is not in your typical high chrome or silver family for the clasps, and I think that's going to go very well with her overall paint scheme, which is in more of the browns. The fact that she's a brunette with dark complexion and brown eyes and all that, it kind of plays into that. I know I'm getting away from all of the black on black on black, but I don't want to end up with brown on brown on brown, so I need to find my derivations and my variations where I can. There's also a greenish brown that I could start almost like an olive green or an olive drab that I can fold into some of these details. I've just been spending the last few minutes painting in the gold gold brass-ish, warm metallic, I'll call it, accents on these boots. Now, painting metallics is always kind of iffy because you want to you don't want to glop it on your, but sometimes you have to get the color that you want, because metallic paints are not, sometimes they're thicker, sometimes they're thinner, and Tamiya, here's an example. The Tamiya gold leaf is a very thick paint, but the titanium gold is a very thin paint, and the dark copper is an even thinner paint. So what I'll do is I'll use the thick gold for the base and the color, and then I'll mix in some of the dark copper, and that dilutes it a little bit, makes it easier for it to flow. And then it's just a matter of taking the old tiny brush, let me clean one off here, very thin brush, and just painting in the details. And sometimes you do that knowing that you're going to have to come back up behind it with, like in this case, it'll be black, and touch up around the edges where the metallic has maybe flowed outside of where it needs to stay. And then you'll have instances like in this zipper. Now I'll go over that zipper with a wash when I'm done to bring out the detail of the teeth. But that's the gold painting, and I tell you, it made it a lot easier by the gift of these things, which I got in the mail yesterday from my pal, good friend of the show. And let me clean them off so I can show them off as best I can. But these came from my friend Blondie up in I want to say New York State, but it's probably in Pennsylvania. And he sent me these, and I gotta tell you, these are a lot more comfortable than the typical headpiece magnifiers. I have been wearing the headpiece magnifiers. Well, you've seen them on the show. I call it a show. You've seen them here. These, basically, you have a vise around the top of your head, and you crank that thing until it's tight. I've been getting headaches from that thing lately because of how tight I've had to keep it on there to keep it from sliding around. These are more like just regular old glasses. They're fixed focal length. They don't have a lot of variation in the focal length like some headpieces. You can swap out the lenses. But for what I need to do right in front of me, they are the perfect focal length, and they've got these built-in lights that I need to recharge. Now, sometimes you can run afoul with the color of that light. If it's throwing a really cool light where you need it to be a warm light or a room light, you can actually go afoul of them if they are throwing a blue light. So sometimes you want to turn that off. You don't want to depend on that light coming because it can foul up your colors. So it's good to have that option to turn them off and on. And they've got a nice little USB recharger here that I can recharge the lights from my computer. So I'll use that. Maybe I'll use the lighting portion of it when I am running detail like I'm running lighting into something, or I'm soldering up something that I need to have detail on. But most of the times I'll have that light turned off for that very reason. I've got a warm overhead light. I've got a daylight lamp. I try to keep my color or my light sources balanced so that I'm not getting an overly blue or an overly yellow light when I'm painting. So that's my only fear, is the concentrated cool light could throw off the colors. But like I said, you could turn them off. But thank you, Baldy. Those are going to come in very, very handy. It's coming up on a late lunch break, so it's a good time to stop. I've just finished the flat black, and this is no fuss, no muss, no special black, just plain old XF1 flat black on all of these pipings on the front and back. And we're starting to see these panels being really clearly delineated now. I did a funky thing that I kind of like. That's why I did it, because I kind of like it. When I was darkening in all of these straps, I noticed there was an annoying thing that was baked into the print, and that is all these areas behind the belt, underneath and behind, which is, you know, lovely. It's showing off your 3D printer. Look, I can print all of this as one piece, and I have voids in behind parts. Yeah, that's great until you try to paint it. Moonjune, if I had your ear for a second, I would make these straps something that you add, not something that is baked into the printed piece, because it's just the devil to try to paint behind them. But I pulled in some of the black to paint in behind the belt, and I just, while the brush was wet, I just swirled it around this goldish panel here, these goldish panels, and I really like the pattern that made. The more I did it, the more I got carried away with it. So I just made some swirls and some doodahs, and it not only covered a multitude of sins when it came to filling out the perimeters of those panels, but actually it broke up that expanse of goldish bronze and made it a more interesting look. So now, of course, I still have all the skin to paint on this, and skin. Again, this is Thursday, depending on how the storm goes, whether I've got power tomorrow and all that kind of good nonsense. The skin might be next week's, skin and head might be next week's video, who knows. But also I've gone in on the arms, I think since the last you saw, with that mixture of the metallic that I used on the boots, and I painted in the buttons and the buckles on both of the arm sleeves. Well, of course they're arm sleeves. They wouldn't be leg sleeves, or else they'd be pants. But these chapped pieces. So those are looking very nice. I got to do the detailing work on the hatchet, and of course paint the skin of the hands. But yeah, I think we're at a good stopping point now. So take a break and come back to it in a bit. Okay, I think I'm ready to call these hips done. I'm ready to do a last check on the legs. If I can get the legs happy, then I can glue those to the base, glue the hips to the legs, and we can start working our way up. I just finished the gold buckle there, or the goldish buckle. So that's going to dry. And then we will move up the body from there. Really happy with how these straps are coming out. So yeah, and the sad thing is, because I have a limited skill set, let's not kid ourselves, the sad thing is some of this stuff is going to have to end up being repainted anyway, as well as I can mask them. When I am masking to paint the skin, chances are very good that it's going to splash back, and I'm going to have to repaint some of the leather. So now I am just seeing how some of these buckles are going to look with a coat of paint on them. I'm liking it. And the thing is, if I can paint them now, and I put this first coat of the metallic down, that when comes time to paint the straps or the skin or whatever, anything that splashes over onto the buckle or onto the metallic, that's not going to be necessarily 100% coverage. So all I need to do would maybe go back in and touch up the metallic color. I wouldn't have to paint it back in from scratch. I need to put some more copper in there, not only because the copper is thinner and it makes the gold easier to flow, but it also darkens it up some. The bright gold is not the look I'm looking for. I want a brushed or a deeper metallic. Now it's possible when all this is said and done I would put a brownish wash over them. I think that might help too as far as antiquing the metallics. Okay, before we close up for tonight, being Thursday night, I want to set the legs into this base, which I have come back and blown the extraneous bits of fluff off, and that's looking good. I want to go ahead and get the legs and the hips, because, you know, as Shakira say, the hips don't lie. I want to get all of that glued together and setting up overnight, so I go ahead and get this much of it put together. So let me whip up a little bit of epoxy. 5-minute epoxy ought to do, and get to setting. Okay, I had to take the camera off the table because this is getting too big to photograph now. This top part is not glued down, but I wanted to put it in place just so that I could check the posture and make sure that everything was getting stuck down in the right orientation, because there is precious little joining space under here. I mean, there's a spot where the left foot pegs into the base and the right hits a divot, but there's no real meat to them. So I wanted to make sure that as this was sitting, that the hips were in fact in the right place. That gun's not glued in because I need to paint the chrome on that before I can finish. Actually, I need to check that to make sure, because that might not be a chrome pistol like Baby Doll's pistol is chrome, but I need to see whether that's a wooden handle or not. So before I glue that in, but the hips are in, it's glued at the thigh, it's glued to the base, and we are halfway home. Hello and welcome. It's Friday. It's the last work day of the week, the last work day on Blondie for this week. It's a rainy day out. It's Friday. The storm Ian, which is done dancing through Florida, has gone off the coast and reformulated into a Category 1 and is going to be hitting South Carolina pretty soon. It will, by the latest track, go far to the west of Raleigh, but that means the eastern side of the storm will be going closest to Raleigh, and everybody knows the eastern side of the storm is where the more damaging part comes, because that's where the rain and the wind comes whipping through. So it's going to be an interesting day. We're expecting more landfall later today, and then it's going to impact us tomorrow, but we'll see what it brings. Probably we'll have a power outage here or there if power goes out, and today, and then obviously the video won't get uploaded, but we'll see how the day goes. I am progressing to look at this, that turned out really nice. Switching gears here, I'm doing some of the accoutrements on the belts. I'm getting very happy with the belt, the way the leather is looking on her straps and such. This is going to be a darker leather, almost a black, so I don't want to brighten it up too much like I've done with the more traditional brown belts. I want this to match the tassels that are going to be coming off of it and the holsters and such, but her suspenders here are really more of a blacker leather, and they're going to have, of course, the goldish, brassish studs that I've got to paint on there. I'm working on the equipment that goes on the back and everything, and I've got the skin kind of pre-shaded underneath. The skin I am very wary to start with today, but if I run out of everything else, I'm going to have to, because there's going to be literally nothing else left to do. I've got the additional ammo packs ready to go on the back. All of these blacks, I just need to make myself happy with whether or not they're being differentiated from each other enough. And of course I need to put some blacks back into the weapons here. I will start on the hands when it comes to doing the skin tone work, because there's little of it there. I'm not having to recreate a color over a large area. Finish up the weapons here, and then we'll be into the hand bits. I'm starting to wonder, thank you Mr. Compressor, I'm starting to wonder whether these are too brown now, but when I put them in connection with the rest of the body, they make a nice contrast. So I rather like the brown when they are part of the whole figure. When they're sitting by themselves, they look a little too brown. So that's why you keep all the parts near, and you are constantly checking your colors against other parts of the same kit. It's hard, I mean, it's easier to lose sight of that when you are not building the entire kit or painting the entire kit at one time, or instead painting parts. You can lose the ball. So sometimes it's handy to have these parts out where you can be constantly comparing them. So yeah, things are looking good here, and we will progress. I did on the legs, which are on the other room right now, but I've taken a little bit of brown, the sienna brown wash, just put it down the teeth of the zippers to give them a little bit more definition. But yeah, we're starting to go for the final rounds on some stuff, and making myself happy. Now, once I get the body the way I want it, I'm going to glue. I think the best option is to glue it to the hips and then poke the tassels up underneath. I don't think I want to start gluing the tassels on until I'm ready to put the two pieces together. So maybe that's something I can do today, is just paint up a bunch of tassels, or the fringes. Just paint a bunch of them and have them ready to go, and then put them on like decorating a tree. And then when you decorate a Christmas tree, you kind of see how many ornaments is too many. And I think I'll just have a bunch of these painted, and then I'll see how many is too many, and then cut back from there. Okay, I don't mind telling you, the skin makes me want to run away screaming. What I'm doing is I'm pre-shading. I'm putting a bunch of tones and shades and shadows that are going to be way too dark on top of the skin now, so that I'm trying to minimize, and I can do all this with a brush, just a regular paintbrush, before I have to mask off to do any airbrushing. And I want to minimize the amount of times I'm airbrushing. So what I'm thinking I'm doing, I'm just trying this out, see if it'll work, and I want to do it on these big areas before I get to the face and the head, is, yeah, that looks horrible. But what I'm hoping to do is let that dry and then bring it back with a single coat or a single application of a lighter flesh tone, that I can just mask all of this once, and then bring the flesh tones back up with the regular, more traditional lighter skin colors. Something that I noticed painting the other figures is that when I airbrushed over top, it got rid of a lot of the brush strokes, and you didn't see all of that going on underneath. So think of it like makeup over top of rough patchy skin. So this is the rough patchy skin. I've put the shadows and the shading in, and then I'm going to very lightly go over top of it, and it's going to be easier for me doing this to kind of gauge when the skin is light enough, because Miss Hudgens is not a very fair-skinned person. So the skin tone is going to be important. I want to make sure I am honoring the actual skin tone and not making it artificially white. So yeah, that looks ugly. And I'm going to start back here on these shoulder blades, because that's going to be the easiest thing to kind of gauge before I move to the front. Okay, here's a quick before and after. I've just done the lighter flesh color over the right shoulder. You can see the left shoulder is still all bruised up and pre-shaded. But I'm thinking that that is looking pretty good. Now I can still see, I don't know how well the subtleties are coming across on the camera, but I can still see the under painting, the under shading, particularly up in the armpit. That and what I've put on top doesn't look near as flat as it would if there was no pre-shading underneath. Whether that shows up a little different or not, you can see all this ugliness is still going on here and how smooth that is. Now I've got the black part masked off, but I can certainly repaint any of that I need to. But that shoulder and into the armpit is looking lovely in my eye. Okay, I wanted to show you that before I went on to doing the left shoulder, and I wanted to do that before I lost the neck and the right colors in the airbrush. Alrighty, it's coming up on 3 o'clock, a little bit after 3 on a Friday afternoon, and with the storm blowing in, I think I'm going to call it a day. Now, I've been spending the last few hours working on the bodice here. I've got the flesh all painted in. I'm happy with that. I put a quick flat coat of flat clear spray on it, and I'm going to play around a little bit more with these cross belts here, these smaller ones, but I wanted to get the suspenders in and painted and get all the studs with the gold on it. And I think the last thing I'm going to do today is to go ahead and attach the arms. That'll be a good way to finish out the week. And then next week all it leaves is the scary part, which is the head and the putting the fringe in around the belt. So let's go ahead and get these arms. I'll mix up some epoxy and get the arms situated, and then we'll stack it all together and we'll show you what we got done this week. Alrighty, and this is where we're going to leave the lovely Blondie for the first week. Not a half bad job for 1 week of work on it. Not too shabby. You'll notice the head obviously needs to be finished. There's a lot of tightening up of some detail here that has to be done, but I was starting to get my big sausage fingers into wet paint, so that wasn't helping anybody. So I needed to back off of that and let everything dry. But the arms are in. Head not glued down yet. Waist, obviously the torso is not glued. Well, not obviously, you don't know. But the torso is not glued into the hips yet, so that I can still take that off to finish the detail. And that only leaves next week to do the troublesome head, the goggles, and put the fringe on top. And here's a nice rear view, so to speak. Got the ammo packs on her back now. The fringe here will cover up some of that. It's going to hang straight down. Need to make sure that the fringe on the arm does not interfere with the fringe coming off of the belt. Those might have to be glued down or tacked down in place. But yeah, all those leathers are looking really nice. Really happy with that. And there's the last ammo pack that would be in the or the cartridge magazine, I guess, that is in the gun, the rifle, the machine gun, the instrument of death. Yeah, this head's just wobbling there, so yeah, not too bad for week 1. And like I said, that's going to bring an end to the end of week 1. I am wearing black in sympathy for all of the black that I've had to paint this week. I'm noticing the trees starting to do the little wiggy thing outside, and rain is coming down, so I want to hurry up and get this video chopped together and uploaded. I might even upload it a little early tonight, who knows, before, just in case anything happens with the power. But next week we should be able to finish up the head and all the tightening up of all the details, and that will be what we do. And if I finish early, then I'll start something in the middle of the week. You know me, as I want to do. So until then, y'all be good, stay safe, be smart, be indoors. It's nasty out there. We'll see you here next week.